Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits and welcome to the recap for the May 9th live stream where I explored many different ways that you can dye yarn with Kool-Aid. In this brief recap, I will give you a close-up of the finished dried yarn and talk a bit about the techniques that we used in the live stream to create it. If you missed the live stream, you can go and watch the replay so you can see in real time how I created these colorways and exactly how much dye, Kool-Aid dye, I used to create them. But before we get into the recap, I want to remind you that to dye yarn with Kool-Aid, you need a protein-based yarn like wool. All the yarn that we did in this video is wool-based. You unfortunately cannot dye cotton or acrylic yarn with Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid is a lot of fun because it's a dry powder. It has citric acid in it, so you don't need any additional acid to dye the yarn. You just need to somehow add some water so things can get wet and the dye can access the yarn, and heat to set the color. For this first colorway, I did a mixture of 1 packet of green apple and 1 packet of blue raspberry lemonade, and then I dip dyed Dyer Supplier's 80/20 sock yarn into it. This yarn is 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. After it had cooled a little bit, we had set for a grassy green color, and then we wrapped up most of the yarn to protect it from the dye and speckled this other end using some grape Kool-Aid. Grape is one of the most pigmented flavors, and you can see that we got some beautiful sharp speckles here. I wanted to show this technique to demonstrate that you can layer techniques on top of one another. So you don't just need to speckle bare yarn, you can dye the yarn and then speckle. The dip dyeing happened on the stovetop, and then the speckling I did on the counter and then set that in the microwave. So you can combine heat sources as well. I did a similar combination of speckling and dip dyeing on a second skein of the Dyer Supplier 80/20 sock yarn. But this time, first I speckled on the Kool-Aid and heat set the yarn. I actually explored both the Cherry KoolAid packets and some of a tub of Cherry KoolAid mixture, which is way less pigmented than the small packets. The larger tubs of Kool-Aid contain sugar, and for those, 1 tablespoon of the powder will create an 8-ounce serving. But with 1 packet of Kool-Aid, which is way less than a tablespoon in total volume, that will create 8 8-ounce servings. So yeah, there's a huge difference in the amount of pigmentation. But if you can't find the packets, you can use the sugar mixtures, but I think cost-wise, it is definitely more cost-effective to get the small packets. After the microwave speckles had cooled a bit, we rotated the skein so that way the speckles would be dipped in a different sort of way, and dip dyed this into 1 packet of blue raspberry lemonade. And so this gave us a little more variation in the colorway, because on the most pastel end we have some section that has light speckles, some heavy, and the same on the blue. We have some heavy speckles and some light speckles. The purpose of these 2 colorways was to show it doesn't matter if you speckle first or second, and that you can layer techniques and layer colors multiple times to get the colorway you want. Now, as far as speckling with Kool-Aid goes, cherry and grape and black cherry are some of the most pigmented colors and will give you some of the darkest, sharpest speckles. You can definitely speckle with a lot of the other flavors, it's just they might be a little bit less pigmented, which is still perfectly okay. Towards the end of the stream, we did 1 more speckled colorway, this time using the Sparkle sock yarn from Dyer Supplier. This yarn is 70% superwash merino, 20% nylon, and 10% stellina. With this yarn, first I used some grape Kool-Aid powder and then lightly speckled onto the bare yarn. Then after we'd set the speckles and let it cool for a bit, we used a portion of the remaining Kool-Aid from that 1 packet to create this lavender base. And I just really wanted to show this to demonstrate just how much pigment there is in one packet of Kool-Aid. And you don't have to use all of it on one colorway. I think we had enough Kool-Aid that I easily could have done 200 grams of this colorway using one packet. So you can tone down your colors when dyeing with Kool-Aid and create some really stunning, subtle colorways. The one flavor of Kool-Aid, or I guess the two that really don't speckle super well, would be lemonade and pink lemonade. They're both super pastel, so although you can get speckles, it's really hard to feel that they're very well defined on the yarn. So if you tried this specific technique with, say, yellow lemonade, you might not see the contrast between the speckles and the pastel base, just because it's not very pigmented at all. Kool-Aid packets are available in a rainbow of colors that are mostly red and pink, but you can mix them to achieve other colors. We got this beautiful warm brown by mixing one packet of orange Kool-Aid with one packet of grape Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid packets are limited on the cooler side of the rainbow in blue, green, and purple. So if you want to expand your arsenal of colors, I recommend that you look at liquid drops or gel food coloring. You can mix these in with your Kool-Aid or use them on their own with some vinegar or citric acid to create a huge variety of colorways. Finally, I wanted to look at the giant tubs of Kool-Aid powder, the sugar mixtures that I purchased just in case I ran out of packets. And I'm regretting that decision a little bit. I miscalculated earlier in the video about the proportions, and the large canisters of Kool-Aid are so much less pigmented than their packet counterparts. This yarn was dyed with 8 heaping scoops of blue raspberry Kool-Aid. And then we dip dyed the Dyer Supplier Sparkle Sock into it to create this beautiful colorway. This blue right here on this yarn was from one packet of blue raspberry lemonade. So yeah, I mean, maybe there's a hint more pigmentation here, but the sheer volume, when this is maybe 1 teaspoon of powder, and the cost differential, if you can find the packets, I recommend going for the packets. If you end up finding these big canisters on sale or you happen to have them, there's really no harm in getting them and using them. The sugar content does not leave a sticky residue on the yarn. We do wash it after we dye it, and so that helps remove the sugar. So if it comes between getting a large sugar canister of Kool-Aid versus, say, some liquid McCormick's food coloring, go for the liquid drops. You'll get more pigment and it will be a little easier to work with. And that is my official recommendation. Finally, I wanted to ramp up the volume a little bit. Using some of the leftover Kool-Aid powders we had on hand, a tiny bit of grape, a little bit of some of the cherry, and then 16 heaping tablespoons of the sugary cherry drink mixture, we dyed 100 grams of Dyer Supplier Marled stock yarn. This yarn is one of my favorite Dyer Supplier bare yarns. It is 40% Peruvian Highland wool, 40% merino, 20% nylon. It's non-superwash, but what's unique about it is that 2 of the plies are a medium gray and 2 of them are a darker gray, which gives you this marled twist that is beautiful. For reference, here is a bare skein of this yarn. I wanted to show that even with the sugary mixture, if you start adding more packets, or I guess the equivalent of more packets, to your project, you can really get deep saturated colors with Kool-Aid. One of the reasons why the other colorways are not quite as pigmented is that I wanted to show you the depths of shade that you can achieve using 1 to 2 packets of Kool-Aid on 100 grams of yarn. In all of these cases, you could do probably even 5 times as much dye to get something that is much more saturated. The one place where you can't really increase the saturation is from the color of the speckles you get with the Kool-Aid. And so for speckles to show up, you really do want a more pastel area. You can do it over something more saturated, it just will be a lot more subtle. And again, if you can't find Kool-Aid packets, but you still want to speckle with food coloring, one great alternative are sugar sprinkles. Those tend to have a fair amount of pigment. The sugar dissolves and leaves that food coloring behind. Another option is to use really concentrated food coloring and use something like a fork, dip the fork in, or use a little paintbrush and manually apply little speckles to your yarn. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that this live stream and recap were helpful to demonstrate a lot of techniques that you can do with Kool-Aid at home. Dyeing yarn with Kool-Aid is such a great way to start your own yarn dyeing journey. It's how I got started over a decade ago. If you want to explore more Kool-Aid techniques for dyeing yarn, I have a whole playlist of videos and really can show how you can have so much fun, and there's so much variety of what you can achieve with this little powdered drink mix. If you want to learn more about these yarn bases or any other places where you can find to support me, I do have affiliate links down in the video description. Please make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on. A lot of my live streams happen fairly last minute, and if you have your notifications on, then hopefully you won't miss them. But if you do miss it, don't worry, the replays are always available later on, so you can go back and watch it later. Which one of these colorways is your favorite? Please let me know down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to see which of these you would most like to recreate yourself. Thank you so much for watching.